Assalamu alaikum. If you love Islamic history, motivation, and true guidance, then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. The northwestern coastal country of the South American continent is a land of striking contrasts. Its diverse regions exhibit vastly different climates.
The lowlands, including the coastal areas, are hot and humid. These regions receive abundant rainfall and are rich in moisture. Dense rainforests cover much of this land.
Home to countless monkeys, snakes, and other insects. Even today, several coastal areas are considered dangerous, but in the 16th century, they were nothing short of a death trap for European explorers.
During a harsh campaign in 1526, a group of exhausted and pitiful Spanish soldiers sought refuge in these unforgiving lands. Swarms of mosquitoes descended upon them.
Many were so weak from hunger that they couldn't even lift a hand to defend themselves. Driven by starvation, some soldiers ate poisonous berries and met their tragic end. The survivors had no choice but to chew on pieces of cowhide to stay alive.
These soldiers were part of an expedition led by the adventurer Francisco Pizarro, a Spanish conquistador, an uneducated man.
By background, Pizarro had arrived in the New World a few years after Columbus.
After years of serving in military expeditions across the New World, Pizarro formed a partnership with a priest named Hernando de Luque and a fellow soldier, Diego de Almagro.
Their aim, to explore and conquer the lands of South America. At this point, all three men were already past their 50s. This quest had become Pizarro's lifelong dream, ever since Balboa had told him.
Beyond the mountains to the south lies a land overflowing with gold, a land where gold is as common as iron is in Castile.
In November 1524, the expedition set off from Panama, tracing the coastline as they slowly made their way south. Whenever supplies ran low, Pizarro would send Almagro back to the islands to gather food and return with provisions.
The ship had never once failed to return, but this time their small vessel was at the mercy of the sea for 10 long days. Storms battered them endlessly. Food supplies were nearly gone.
A small group was sent to shore in hopes of finding provisions, but all they managed to bring back was some drinking water and firewood. The soldiers were showing signs of rebellion. Pizarro, faced with a critical decision, chose to send half his crew with the ship to Isla de las Perlas to search for fresh supplies.
The rest would remain behind, stranded in the humid, swampy land, surviving on whatever little they could find, while continuing their investigation of this mysterious territory.
Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. 20 men had already perished. The remaining crew feared that the supply team had abandoned them, but Pizarro kept assuring them.
"Gold, endless gold lies in the south," he reminded them. "We are close, closer than ever." Then one day, a soldier returned from wandering the forest with news. He had seen a flickering light between the trees.
Without wasting a moment, Pizarro gathered the few men still able to walk, and they hacked their way through the jungle toward the light. They stumbled into a clearing. It was an Indian village. At the sudden sight of white men, the villagers panicked and disappeared into the forest. The Spaniards rushed into the abandoned huts and devoured whatever food they could find.
But as soon as the villagers realized these strangers meant no harm, they returned. And then Pizarro froze. His eyes were drawn to the villagers' jewelry, pure gold gleaming in the sunlight.
With hand gestures and signs, the Spaniards asked, "Where does this gold come from?" The villagers pointed to the south, a faraway land rich with gold beyond imagination. Overjoyed, Pizarro and his men returned to the shore, energized, revived, and bearing news. And there it was. Their supply ship had finally returned. They boarded the vessel and turned it southward. Pizarro made a bold decision. He would continue with a small team on foot toward Puerto de San Juan, while the ship's captain, Bartolomé Ruiz, would sail with the rest farther down the coast. As Ruiz journeyed across the desolate sea, he spotted something strange in the distance. It looked like a ship, but as he drew closer, he realized it wasn't a ship. It was a massive raft built by tying together large tree trunks lashed tightly with rope. A mysterious vessel sailing these ancient waters. As the vessel drew closer, Ruiz saw that it carried 10 Indians, some of whom were women. The raft was laden with pottery, woolen fabrics, golden bowls, and gold measuring instruments such as scales and balances. These goods were being transported along the coast for trade purposes. Ruiz learned that the raft had come from a distant port called Tumbes. According to the Indians, the ruler was Chayana Capac, and their capital was located in Cusco. In his palace, they claimed, gold and silver were as common as wood. Ruiz wasted no time in sending this news to his commander in San Juan. He also brought along several Indians, one of whom was a young man named Filipillo, who would later become the Spaniards' first interpreter in the region. At that time, Pizarro and his companions were in a dire situation. 14 of their men had been killed in a sudden Indian attack, and many others had fallen ill. But the astonishing news brought by the ship's captain revived their spirits and gave them hope. They quickly set out southward and arrived at an Indian town which they named Tumbes. This town had more than 2,000 houses, many of them decorated with gold and precious stones. Some of Pizarro's cavalrymen were preparing to plunder the town, but the Spaniards were soon met by 10,000 young warriors who had never seen horses before. These natives believed that the horse and rider were one single four-legged creature. They launched a violent attack with arrows and stones. The cavalrymen believed that reaching their ship alive was nearly impossible. Then something unexpected happened. A Spanish soldier fell from his horse. The natives were astonished. They had always thought the man and the beast were one being. Seeing them separated made them nervous. Separate confused and frightened them. They backed away, clearing a path, and the Spaniards escaped safely back to their ship. Faced with such hostility and overwhelming numbers, some members of Pizarro's group began considering returning to Panama. But Pizarro, standing on the threshold of a mighty empire, was determined to push forward. He was willing to go on even if it meant continuing alone. Only 13 men, including Ruiz, agreed to remain with him. The rest returned to Panama, but not before promising to send reinforcements. Pizarro, the captain, and their small group of volunteers took refuge on a tiny island and waited. Finally, a ship arrived. It brought food supplies, but no additional men. Still, the fearless little band boarded the ship, accompanied by the Indians Ruiz had brought from the raft, and they set sail again, heading south. After 20 days, they found themselves traveling along a low and sandy shore. Near the shore, there were farming fields. Hundreds of people stood near the coast, watching the ship move forward. The Indian interpreter with the blue scarf told them that Tumbes was less than a day's journey away. Soon, Pizarro saw the city's white buildings and tall towers standing proudly in a green field. Pizarro sent a messenger to the town's Indian governor with an invitation for dinner.
The governor accepted the invitation and sent food supplies and many llamas as gifts for the Spaniards. It was
First time any European had seen such a strange animal mountain. Pizarro offered wine to the governor, and when they drank together, he said,
I am a loyal servant of the greatest king in the world, whose legal rule is over this land. My mission is to help you and your people come out of the darkness of doubt in which you are lost.
The Indian gave no reply to this surprising speech, but he politely asked to leave. The next day, Pizarro sent Alonso de Molina with a pig and some
chickens as a gift for the governor. Molina came back and said that the governor's palace was full of wealth. He also said that he saw very beautiful women there, more beautiful than he had ever seen before.
Pizarro was very happy to hear about the wealth of Peru, but he didn't try to attack. He didn't want to take a risk because he had only a few men with him. Instead, he decided to explore more of the coast.
And then return to Panama. He wanted to prepare another group of explorers and bring more soldiers so they could succeed in capturing the land.
On the way back, the ship stopped twice at Tumbes. Many of the ship's crew members loved the beauty of the place and decided to live there. They hoped that when Pizarro returned, he would find people who understood the local language and customs.
In 1527, Pizarro returned to Panama. He had been away for 18 months. During that time, big changes were happening in the land of the Incas.
In 1527, the Incan Empire ruled over Peru. Its capital was the great city of Cuzco. The empire was divided into 4 smaller parts, and each was ruled by a close relative of the emperor. When Pizarro first entered Peru, the 11th Incan ruler, Huayna Capac, was the king, but soon after, the news of his death began to change everything.
As death approached, he made a will in which he declared that the southern part of the empire should be given to Atahualpa, and the rest of the kingdom should be ruled by
his rightful heir, Huáscar. He gathered his wise men, nobles and provincial rulers, and addressed them.
Our father the sun has revealed to me that after 12 Incan rulers, a new race of unknown men will appear in our land and will bring our empire under their control. These may be the same people whose messengers have already arrived on our coasts. But believe me, foreigners will surely reach this land, and this prophecy will be fulfilled. Francisco Pizarro had no idea that his arrival at Tumbes had caused such unrest. All he knew was that the time had come to claim himself as the master of the Incan Empire.
To continue his mission, he needed royal permission and honors. He convinced the King of Spain to sign a document declaring him the lifetime governor and captain general of Peru. Thus, a Spanish colonel's illegitimate son, who could neither read nor write until his death, managed to secure control over an empire he barely knew and had hardly stepped foot in. He returned to the Americas and on December 28, 1530, departed from Panama with 3 ships, 180 men, and 27 horses. Once again, he was headed toward Tumbes. Upon arriving in the city, Pizarro took possession of 2 houses. Alonso de Molina and the other Spaniards who had been living there came to meet the arriving European soldiers. They brought interesting news. The land that the Spanish were planning to conquer had fallen into civil war. 2 brothers were fighting for the throne, both sons of the late Emperor Huayna Capac. Pizarro learned that Atahualpa, one of the brothers, was camped just 10 to 12 days' journey away. Upon hearing this, Pizarro decided to try and arrange a meeting with him, perhaps inspired by the way Cortés had succeeded in Mexico using diplomacy. In any case, it was a bold decision. With just 200 men, he was planning to conquer an entire empire.
A great battle had been fought between the forces of the Inca brothers. Atahualpa had emerged victorious. His army had captured Huáscar, destroyed his forces, and
killed many of his relatives. After his victory, Atahualpa reached the town of Cajamarca, not far from Cusco.
It was during this moment of triumph that his men brought news. The white-skinned strangers had returned. Atahualpa consulted his advisors. Should he use military force against these strangers? But what if they were gods? It would be wiser to wait and try to learn more about their strength and intentions. Spies had been sent into the coastal plains. Every movement of Pizarro and his men was being closely monitored and reported. Atahualpa sent a delegation to Pizarro, along with gifts of gold and silver. The delegation aimed to impress upon the Spaniards the greatness of their ruler, a powerful king who had won many victories and commanded vast authority.
However, the white leader was neither impressed nor intimidated. He replied that his own king ruled the entire world, and his generals had conquered kings far more
powerful than Atahualpa. He offered the Inca a choice: friendship or war. Atahualpa continued to keep a close watch on the invaders. Meanwhile, the Indian spies working for
Spaniards reported that Atahualpa was encamped not far from the city and had a strong army stationed around him.
Pizarro, though disturbed by this information, did not let his fear show. Instead, he declared, "We have no other option. The only path for us is to advance. Every one of you must remain courageous and move forward like a good soldier. Their numbers cannot defeat us." On November 15, 1532, Pizarro's small army began to advance toward the plains of Cajamarca. He had only 200 men ready to move toward the city. Pizarro then ordered De Soto to go to Atahualpa's camp with some cavalry and invite him to a meeting with the Spaniards. De Soto arrived at Atahualpa's camp. The Inca ruler was seated on a throne, his eyes fixed on the ground. He didn't even glance at De Soto. As De Soto approached
Pizarro's message, Atahualpa sat silently and motionless, listening. After a long pause, he responded,
"The Spaniards have treated the governors of my provinces with disrespect."
De Soto replied,
Christians offer peace and friendship to allies, but fight against rebels.
Hearing this, Atahualpa proposed an alliance with the Spaniards against a rebellious chief, saying,
Only 10 Christian horsemen will be enough to defeat him.
The next morning, a delegation from Atahualpa arrived in Cajamarca, announcing that the Inca was willing to meet Pizarro, accompanied by armed men. Pizarro responded that the Inca would be
As a friend, whether he chose to come armed or unarmed. To express goodwill, Atahualpa agreed to come with unarmed men.
By afternoon, the people of Peru began to appear. The Inca arrived, accompanied by thousands of unarmed followers. When the procession entered the city, not a single Spanish soldier was visible. Only Pizarro stood on a terrace, waiting to welcome the Inca. Beside him stood a bearded priest named Friar Valverde. Pizarro signaled the priest to step forward. With a Bible in one hand and a crucifix in the other, the friar approached Atahualpa. He told the Inca that he was a servant of God and had come to explain the contents of this holy book.
Atahualpa took the Bible from his hand and tried to open it, but not understanding how it worked, he tossed it aside, and it fell to the ground.
Pizarro gave a signal to Pedro de Candia, who was hiding nearby. A loud gunshot rang out. Spanish foot soldiers emerged from buildings. Cavalry burst out from nearby alleys. Outside the town, artillery began firing on the Incas who surrounded the city. Terrified, the Indians tried to flee through the city's narrow gates, but Spanish swords cut them down.
Mercilessly. Soon the slaughter ended. Over 2,000 Indians were killed, while cavalry pursued thousands more beyond the city.
Pizarro had captured Atahualpa and taken him to a palace, where he treated him with apparent respect. That night, Pizarro, following the authority granted to him by the
Spanish crown, officially assumed the titles of governor, captain general, and chief justice. Despite being a prisoner, Atahualpa was treated with royal dignity.
Pizarro visited him almost daily. Through an interpreter named Felipillo, they discussed various matters. Pizarro learned about the history of the Incas, their laws, institutions, and society. Atahualpa, aware of the Spaniards' lust for gold, told Pizarro that although he was imprisoned, a single command from him would prompt his subjects to bring the entire treasure of his empire to his feet. Pizarro agreed. If Atahualpa could fill the room he was held in with gold, he would be freed.
Messengers were sent throughout the empire with Atahualpa's orders. Soon piles of gold began arriving in Cajamarca. The Indians carried the gold on their backs, and the room began to fill.
Father Valverde, tasked with converting Atahualpa to Christianity, asked if the emperor would be baptized and freed since his ransom had been paid. This
request shocked Pizarro. If he freed Atahualpa, there was a high chance that the Inca ruler would lead a rebellion against the Spanish.
De Soto suggested sending Atahualpa to Spain to stand trial. However, the issue was resolved by the interpreter Felipillo, who falsely told Pizarro that Atahualpa was
secretly plotting a rebellion and assembling an army near Cuzco. Pizarro's companions now demanded immediate action. Some called for the Inca's execution,
while others wanted him freed. The report of a conspiracy inflamed Pizarro's fears. He decided to send De Soto to investigate and confirm whether Atahualpa truly had an army gathering for rebellion.
News of the army's preparations had already spread. Meanwhile, Pizarro's political advisors were pressing him to put Atahualpa on trial and sentence him. Even Pizarro
himself couldn't reach a final decision, so he convened a court of justice consisting of Friar Valverde, a legal advisor, and 4 cavalry captains.
The Inca was charged with rebellion. The trial was little more than a formality, a mere passing of judgment. Atahualpa was neither brought before the court nor given an interpreter any chance to defend himself. The sentence was already decided. He was to be burned alive. For the first time, Atahualpa pleaded for his life. He argued that if he were burned alive, his people would hide their remaining treasures, and the conquerors would receive no more gold or silver. But Pizarro claimed he could not overturn the court's verdict. The most he could offer was a more merciful death, if Atahualpa agreed to convert to Christianity. On an evening in August 1533, about 2 hours after sunset, the Spanish army gathered in torchlight on a wide field to witness the execution of the Inca emperor.
Was brought to the field with his hands and feet shackled. By then, he had been baptized a Christian. As soon as he appeared, the Indians,
the present, fell to their knees in reverence. They did not rush forward to save him. They were not the kind of souls who would act on
their own behalf. They could only accept his death, and with it, the symbolic death of their nation. A Spanish soldier blew a trumpet, and silence fell across the field.
Atahualpa turned to Pizarro and said,
take care of my children." The priest prayed for his soul, and the Inca was executed. The very next day, De Soto returned
from his mission. When he heard of Atahualpa's death, he was horrified. He said, "You could have at least waited for our return." He further informed Pizarro,
"There is no sign of rebellion anywhere in the country. Everywhere we went, we were treated with hospitality and respect." The historian Prescott wrote with complete accuracy, "The treatment of Atahualpa stands as one of the darkest chapters in the colonial history of Spain."